Hello and welcome to another edition of The Wrap Up, where your Toronto Raptors have once again lost the season series, the sweep to the Detroit Pistons for the second consecutive season, I believe. 108-106 for Detroit in another classic Dwayne Casey revenge game. I got Zarar with me. Zarar, do you believe in this curse? Like, what do you think is really responsible for Casey? Do you think he really overscouts the Raptors and fires? Do you think the Raptors are the ones who can't really show up for these games? What is it about these games?
Well, I think first of all, I think I just want to say that there's a saying that the sun shines on a dog's ass. It even shines on a dog's ass, and Dwayne Casey, the sun is shining on his ass when he plays the Raptors or whatever it is. It's pretty perplexing. Do you think do the Raptors are they nervous heading into a Dwayne Casey game? Does Dwayne Casey over prepare for the Raptors? I probably think Dwayne Casey, it's more that Dwayne Casey knows the Raptors, knows Nick Nurse, and knows not necessarily the plays that the Raptors will run or what specific actions they will run. I think Nick Nursey. I think Dwayne Casey has a general sense of what Nick Nurse prioritizes in a game. And I think he's able to take that broad strategy and translate it into some sort of a tactical approach. I think the way the Pistons sort of beat the Raptors down the court in this game, especially in the first half, and got a lot of easy baskets to get back into the game, is an example of that. Is that he knows that Nick Nurse prefers to crash the offensive rebound, so why not leak out early and put the Raptors under pressure even after made baskets? And that's difficult, right? After a made basket, the offensive team is supposed to have time to get back to a defensive position and sort of defend with some stability. But Dwayne Casey is sort of like saying, like, I don't care if you make the basket, we're running anyways, right? So that sort of throws the Raptors off, and it definitely threw them off in the first half. So I think I don't think the Raptors are getting nervous. I think Casey just sort of knows some of the broad strokes that the Raptors paint with.
Yeah, I think in a lot of games that we've seen between these two teams, we do see the Raptors really fail that kind of effort level to match the effort level of Detroit. And this game, you mentioned a few of those fast break plays where Detroit got out and run, and that's an effort thing for sure. In general, though, I kind of think this specific game was more just an example of like OG and Fred are out. Not a ton of shooting, especially, was probably the biggest thing, where the Raptors shot 7 for 26 on the game, 26% from three in general. So I think that was really more than any like Dwayne Casey, Nick Nurse shit. And we'll get back to some Raptors. I have to ask you this because I kind of want to talk about it, and I rarely want to talk about this because it's such a like overplayed point in NBA talk. But like, the reffing tonight was pretty questionable, right? Or do you don't want to go there? Like,
I mean, the reffing is questionable. I mean, I made a big last time I was invited to the show. I mean, I talked about freaking what's his name, Mr. freaking one eyebrow, freaking baseball for a head referee. What's his name? Tony Brothers, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's always. What do you want to talk about the refs for? Like, what specifically do you think is the issue here?
Well, I think here Nick Nurse got tossed. That was kind of a big part of the game, and Siakam just could not kind of get the calls that he thought he was deserving of. And I thought there was a lot of like pretty bad calls. The Delano call was really bad. The one they challenged was bad. There was a couple clean blocks that I thought got called on the Raptors that were pretty clean.
Mm-hmm.
And yet on the other side of the floor, like, Siakam was driving and getting hit by a bunch of guys, and he wasn't really getting the calls. Like, I think it was actually a really poorly reffed game, and I think more to the point is Siakam has such a bad whistle for how good of a star he is and how physical of a player he's been this year. I'm constantly shocked by the whistle he gets.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think if one thing I can say about the whistle is that the aggressive team usually gets the benefit of the doubt when it comes to officiating, which is sort of like almost an anti, it's almost would be backwards. And the Pistons are an aggressive team. Sadiq Bey and those guys, and even Cade Cunningham, they invite contact in the paint. And they also, frankly, look a little bit more coordinated when they go into the paint. Siakam, as great as he is, still sort of when he enters the painted area, looks, even though he's not out of control, he sometimes looks like he's not fully in control of his actions. And I think that bias plays on the refs a little bit, and they sort of go, oh, this guy's a little out of control. Maybe I'll swallow my whistle. So I think that's what's going on there. I think it's gotten better. It's gotten a lot. If you compare Siakam, the calls he gets this year versus the calls he got last year or the year before, you'll definitely see he's getting more calls, no doubt. So it's almost like a linear trajectory there, which he's benefiting from. But I 100% agree with you. The Raptors are not getting calls that they should be getting, and there's plenty of examples of that. And Nick Nurse has a complete right to be upset at the officiating in this game. I just feel the Pistons guards are better center of gravity, more in control when they drive, better physical presence as well. So the refs kind of fall for that. I mean, the refs are humans at the end of the day as well, and they look at a guy. They almost make the call before the call actually happens. Sometimes, honestly, they make up their mind before it, and I think some of the awkwardness Siakam possesses kind of works against him.
Yeah, one of my biggest pet peeves is like refs will just make a call every time someone hits the floor, even if there's no foul and they just hit the floor themselves. It's a hard thing to officiate, of course, but that's just like a pet peeve because you get the whistle every single time, and so often it's that person hits the floor.
Because we always say basketball is the hardest sport to officiate because things happen so bang bang. I kind of raised my eyebrow at that comment every time I heard it, because I'm not a big hockey guy, or I don't watch much hockey, but that seems like a sport which is pretty tough to call as well.
Same with football. I think those refs are in a hard position.
Those are, how many times can you sort of make the same call the refs made when the ref made the call while you're watching the game? Like almost 95% of the time, I can make the call that the ref made, and I'm watching it on TV. So it's not really that hard to get the call right. And when you blatantly miss a call, that seems to me like, either you're biased, which I will give them the benefit of the doubt, or two, you're not very good at your job. Maybe it's one of the two. I don't know.
No, for sure. And like you're right that Siakam's been going to the line more this year than last year, but he's also just been a way more physical player. He's initiating contact. He's driving way more than he has ever have. I actually like that about his game, just in terms of you'll now see how Siakam barely takes threes, right? They come to the ball gets past him on the perimeter. He has kind of a semi-open three. Instead, he'll kind of slow it down, get the matchup he wants, and play out of that. And that works so much better to his advantage than like a semi-contested three would. Mm-hmm. But okay, that's probably enough ref talk. I want to get back to something you said about, well, you mentioned the Pistons guards being more on balance. Forget about balance. In general, I think the Pistons guards heavily outplayed the Raptors guards tonight, right? You look at Malachi Flynn and Gary Trent Jr., and then you look at Corey Joseph, who only had 5 points, but I thought played really well as a playmaker, and then Cade Cunningham, who was amazing just throughout the whole game, hitting kind of big shot after big shot, and then he came up with that huge block to seal the deal. So instead, the Raptors kind of went to this ultra big, minimal negative spacing lineup to close the game. How did you feel about that lineup? Flynn specifically kind of getting outed in favor of Chris Boucher. And like just in general, how do the Raptors maybe like navigate some of these spacing issues?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I think we tend to overanalyze basketball. I really think it's a question of not enough shooting being out on the court. If you don't have, this is such simple analysis but it is applicable here, unfortunately, is that we just don't have enough shooters on the court. And when you don't have enough shooters on the court, you're giving the defense a lot of options on how to play defense, right? Now you have the freedom to go and double where you want, roam where you want, switch where you want, without the fear of paying a price for it. So, and yeah, I mean, each has 1, 2, 3 is right. I mean, we're bad at shooting, and especially
to be fair, Van Vliet and OG are both out.
Yes, yeah, they're both out. So there you go. Here are the stats that does it: 7 for 26 from 3. We're bad at shooting, and basketball is a lot to do with shooting the ball, man. You can't shoot, you can't win. And this is something that I think that the Raptors very well knew at the deadline. This should not be a surprise to anybody. Masai and Bobby Webster were very comfortable heading into the stretch with the lineup that they have, and we're seeing what the results of that are. I mean, I don't think there's anything more to be said here, to be honest with you. What I'm more surprised is what the hell happened to Gary Trent Jr. on that last possession. Did he forget the score? Why did he go for a two?
Oh, I think his plan was to just get the quick two, foul, and then kind of try to play out of that, like hope for a missed free throw them. But yeah, it was bad execution, regardless of how you feel about going for a two or a three. He just drove way too slowly there, and Cade had a lot of time to come over and block the shot. I think the only thing about spacing that you can talk about is maybe like the rotations you can criticize a little bit. And I'm usually not one to do that, but in the last two games, I've been really surprised by the rotation decisions. Like, first of all, I think this is not a spacing thing, but I just think Precious has been significantly better than Kem Birch. So let's start him and get away with, like, I don't understand that. And the second thing is just like, I thought at least they would put Malachi in when they needed a bucket. They called a timeout, and then it was like, you put your best offensive players out there and you need a bucket. Malachi at least will draw the defense. He has that threat, especially the way he shot the ball the last few games. Whereas Chris Boucher, like, for all the hustle he's doing, he's not scaring a defense. I have a funny question for you, but don't look at the box score. I hope you're not, okay? So a couple Raptors had three-point attempts today. A few of them did. Well, after that, there was one player who had more than three, and that was Gary Trent Jr. How many three-point attempts did Gary Trent Jr. have tonight?
I think he shot a lot, man. I mean, I think every shot. I mean, he had a lot. I would say around like 10, 11. I'd say
15.
15. Wow.
Three for 15. Yeah.
Okay.
So that just shows you how many shooters are on this team right now.
Yeah.
One guy shoots 15 threes and nobody else takes more than three.
And that, I think that's also a symptom of guys just passing up shots, knowing that they're not good shooters. So, when this is like a street ball, man. Like when you have like one player who can shoot, you just get him the ball. Hopefully he can make it. So you would rather him take a bad shot than you take a more wide open shot, because you're that bad at shooting, or that's how low your confidence is in shooting the ball. I think that's what's happening with those 50. I don't think Gary Trent Jr. is going there saying, okay, I'm going to just take over the game kind of because I'm the man now. It's more like guys who are just deferring to him, knowing that they can't shoot.
Yeah, a lot of bailout possessions for him for sure. He's often the guy who comes over from kind of the weak side when whatever is not working, takes the ball in his hands, and then there's 10 seconds on the shot clock, and he takes a step back three or something. And some nights that those shots are falling, and Gary Trent Jr. looks like the best player to ever grace a Raptors uniform. And then some nights, and coming out of All-Star break, those shots haven't been falling at all for him. And when the shot's not falling, there's not a whole lot else that he's really doing. I will say, like, 4 assists has kind of been more consistent recently. The playmaking has picked up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Precious versus Birch. You seem to agree with me that Precious should just start games.
Well, I think right now he definitely should start. I think he's improved considerably. I think his dribble's gotten a lot tighter. He can sort of. I think the point at which he gathers the dribble on his drive has improved. Before, and also you don't see him so much bringing the ball up the court anymore. Like, you see him sort of catching it in the position where he feels comfortable with it, and then driving fairly quickly instead of kind of looking around and figuring out what's going on. So, and also his finishing has improved. Even though he's still missing more bunnies than he's still missing bunnies that he should make, but his finishing has definitely improved. And this is actually a pretty decent example here, where he sort of led with his shoulder, drove the defender out of the way, and then finished obviously nicely. So if you this play maybe a couple of months ago, he forces it up a little too early, giving the defender the advantage. But here he gathered it enough so the defender kind of had to be forced out of the way. Kind of his shoulder forced him out of the way, and he had a chance to lay it in. So Precious, I think, has been good. He's always been good defensively. I don't think that's ever been a question against him. Now he's and remember, we don't have extremely high expectations of Precious on offense. It's not like he needs to outperform his opposition in terms of points to see the court. He just needs to sort of play even, maybe a little bit less than even, be an option on the second or third pass on the play. And I think he's kind of finding where he fits into the offense now, and more getting involved on the finishing of the plays than the initiating of the plays.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with him versus Birch, it was always Birch is a better offensive player. So even though Precious has been better defensively, they kind of stuck with Birch. He's less of a high usage guy, I think, is also a reason the coaching staff likes him there. But Birch's little shot has fallen off a cliff. And so if Birch doesn't have that push shot, he's really not giving much to the offense at all. And meanwhile, Precious is doing a ton for the offense. Even the 3-point shooting for the corners, I wrote about him. Last 20 games, he's shooting 50% from three, and that's on about 2 a game. So, yeah, that's not sustainable. But these corner threes are really starting to pick up for him, and it's becoming a better source of offense. And yeah, if Birch doesn't have any offense, then what is the justification for starting him over Precious? I even dislike Birch at times, how passive he is. Like, there was one play where early in the game, Siakam dribbled it up. It was like a 3-on-2 in transition. And he passed to Birch on the left baseline, and he couldn't kind of find the pass over. And Birch just completely stopped the offense, and it reset to a half-court possession. Whereas Precious, for better or worse, Precious would have made something happen. He might have got to the free throw line. He might have tried a pass that, didn't work out so well. It went out of bounds maybe, but Precious would have went and continued that transition opportunity. And I like that. In the starting lineup, I like that aggression that he brings, as you said, as a play finisher.
And I think Birch works well with Van Vliet, because Van Vliet is able to give him the ball in those little pick and roll situations, pick and pop situations, really, near the elbow area, maybe between the 3-point line and the elbow. That's his range. I don't necessarily think Flynn or Banton or even Siakam have played enough with Precious or with Birch to develop that chemistry where they find him in those tight spaces, right? So it's almost very awkward to play Birch with any of the ball handlers we had today, because he's used to receiving a nice little Van Vliet bounce pass right near the top of the key and doing something with it. I don't think he got that today. So I don't think we should be so harsh on Birch's offense, because I don't think he was playing with the guard that he's most comfortable playing with.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Maybe lastly, we could talk about Siakam a bit, because I'm looking at the box score, and 10 for 15 tonight, along with 8 for 10 for the free throw line. And that's those are pretty dominant numbers. And yeah, it didn't feel like he was dominating the game at any point. And I think that I really don't blame Siakam at all for this. I think what's happening is that defenses are really keying in on him, sending a lot of bodies his way. He's making the right read pretty consistently. And then the other guys just aren't able to kind of finish those advantages as high level or as efficiently as the Raptors kind of need them to. But do you think it would be fair to ask more from Pascal than what he's kind of been doing over these last few games, or do you think that those would just be unrealistic expectations?
So here's Pascal Siakam scoring and misses by the quarter, right? This is not a situation where he kind of padded his stats when the game didn't matter. This guy was consistent throughout this game. So let's call that. Sometimes stats can be misleading, and you're like, when did he get his point? So Pascal Siakam was consistent throughout this game. And this is nothing more than a continuation of his season since January. When I think of Siakam, and I'm like, okay, what is the next? What's next for him as a player? Let me ask you this question. What do you think Siakam's next development step is? What's next for him?
That's pretty. I'd say probably the mid-range shooting. It's not a next thing as much as it's already developing for him. But if he can just keep upping that percentage, I was reading a really good profile of DeMar DeRozan in GQ today, and It was just saying how like DeMar, everyone always told him to take threes, and he just kept like going against this like what the modern NBA was saying, and just kept improving his mid-range shot until like what he's literally a top 3 MVP candidate. Like he improved it to the point where it's impossible to stop. And I think Siakam, given his height, given his high release point, it's KD-esque when he gets in those areas, not in terms of the execution, but in terms of like no one can defend that shot, especially when he fades, especially when he spins. So I think, yeah, like as much as there's other areas like the 3-point shooting would be nice, it's just like there's not enough evidence to believe that he could become a great 3-point shooter. So why ask him to do that? It's more so he's already a good mid-range shooter. If he could become an excellent mid-range shooter, then he's a closer, right?
Yeah.
Then he's a whole different player.
Yeah, and I think Chris, our producer, just like highlighted a comment there, and I thought we sort of have gone away from Pascal in the post a little bit. I've seen much less of that of late, because there was a stretch there in I want to say Jan, mid-Feb, where we were looking at Pascal in the post fairly significantly as an option, and in a situation where you don't have Fred VanVleet, you don't have OG, you're kind of struggling to score. How else can you create sort of easy points for your team? And I would think that a Pascal post up, especially given his ability to survey the field when he has the ball, whether it's back to the basket or facing, would be an asset. So I thought, how many assists did he have today? Actually, I can tell you, 2 assists.
2, yeah.
He had 2 assists, and if I can see this, those 2 assists went to Delano Banton and Malachi Flynn, right? And in a good game for the Raptors, with Pascal being a primary ball handler, I would imagine that his assists should go to guys like Precious or Boucher as he's creating for them. So that assist distribution alone, which is on the screen here, sort of tells you how, even though Pascal had a good offensive game, he really in this game wasn't able to create for others like he normally does. And that's understandable because of the missing players and all that. But when that's happening, why not put him into the block more and kind of use his strengths of passing and see what he can pick out there instead of people forcing shit.
Yeah. Chris, our producer, Chris, do you have any ideas about the Pascal post-ups? I'll be right back.
Yeah, let's just give Zarar full screen here. You're the star of the show. But yeah, in terms of the Siakam stuff, I think that definitely not having the primary guys is a huge part of it. But also, like, I feel like you kind of have to give some credit to the Pistons defense. I thought that they really impressed me defensively. Like, they were staying in front of guys. Isaiah Stewart, obviously, like, that's sort of our, kryptonite, is a guy with that kind of size. He seemed like he was all over the offensive glass. And so I feel like when you have that, and when they're able to contain Siakam's dribble penetration, that's when he stops being able to like find open guys and create for himself and all that stuff.
Yeah. What do you think of the Raptors and their general ability to prevent or contain dribble penetration in general and also in this game?
Well, it's an interesting question because the sort of what, obviously this is the Birch Achua question, right? Because that's sort of the dichotomy there. But I think it's an interesting situation because you hear so much about like, oh, the Raptors, they want to funnel people into the middle. But if that's the case, then I would kind of ask why, because they don't really have rim protectors. Like Boucher had a nice block today. Achua can get up for blocks, but like it's all undersized guys trying to get up for blocks, right? So why you don't have a Rudy Gobert, you don't even have like a Dwayne Dedmon, like just a big stiff to stand in the middle. So why are you trying to funnel guys into the paint like that?
Yeah, and totally understand that preventing dribble penetration is a hard job. It's not something that people can just it's very easy for us to talk about to stop dribble penetration, but it's in reality it's very difficult because these guys are super quick and all that stuff. But at the same time, I think when you have the length that the Raptors possess in pretty much every position, shouldn't it be easier to contain dribble penetration? I feel like the length that that is supposed to help us contain the perimeter isn't really helping. It's sort of helping us to recover sometimes on 3-point shooters and sort of force a swing sequence, but we still tend to play guys fairly tight up top, which invites them to the drive. Are you surprised that our length isn't playing a better part in preventing that initial attack into the paint?
Yeah, well, in this game specifically, like you look at the guys that Nurse was running towards the end of the game, like he was trotting out like the multiple bigs lineup. Like he was putting out Boucher and Achua and Siakam on the court together. And those guys, like, I think that you sort of have to create different expectations depending on the type of player, right? Because like if it's say a wing player like a Yuta Watanabe, like then maybe staying in front of a wing player or a guard is more to be expected. But when you have a guy like Boucher, even though he does have great length and or Achua, like a guy who you'd say he can move it on the perimeter better than most big men, he's not really a point of attack wing defender, even though he did such a great job on Cade Cunningham. Like you have to sort of temper your expectations. And I think that's one of the huge roster deficiencies that was sort of created by holding on to Boucher, trading for Thad Young, who actually would have been good at this in this game, trying to sort of contain that point of attack. But if you have like four guys who are maybe more towards the power forward side than the wing side, then that's sort of where you get into trouble trying to contain like a Cade Cunningham or even a Sadiq Bey, who I thought was great tonight.
Yeah, and you know, I think Oren kind of led the show off by talking about the closing lineup, which was a bit unorthodox and did not have Malachi Flynn in it. But when you look at the actual closing lineup, and here it is: Achua, Boucher, Barnes, Siakam, Gary Trent Jr. That lineup played, you know, between 7-10 of the fourth to the end of the game, and they were a +6 in that stretch. So totally understand. Even though it made the eye test tells you that, you know, just by looking at it, you may think, oh, maybe Flynn should have played there. He had a better game, could have done more. But at the end of the day, that lineup was producing for the Raptors. So this Achua, Boucher, Barnes, Siakam, Trent Jr. lineup was pretty effective.
Yeah, I thought, and you know, they mentioned on the broadcast at one point that the Pistons had a stretch where they were 1 for 10 from the field, and so the defense was working there for a while. And then I think just it's sort of if you're gonna lean heavily into defense, then you're gonna end up with maybe a lineup that struggles to score down the stretch as well.
Yeah. If you want to talk about a lineup that struggled, it's this third quarter lineup of Trent, Flynn, Barnes, Birch, and Siakam, and we talked about Birch there for a bit. -13, this lineup was to basically to start the third quarter. And as you can look at this this graphic here, we hung on to this lineup for a while. Nick Nurse was a bit slow to make this change here. This lineup was getting slaughtered from the start of the third quarter to the 5-minute mark of the third. We were -13, and you know this is coaching, man. You gotta. I mean, are you gonna wait till -13 in the lineup to make a change? That seems like that's on the coach.
Yeah, well, that's the Birch thing as well. Like if you question why is Birch in the starting lineup, why is Birch going on like -10, -15 runs, like it's hard to see right now, especially when he seems to be injured and his shot isn't really working at all for him. Like you struggle to see what he's bringing to the table exactly.
Yeah. And just going on Birch, you know, in his third quarter, 7-minute third quarter stint, he got on the hook for a -13. So that kind of sort of, and in that, what did he do in that stretch? He basically picked up a foul, missed a shot, and then missed 2 shots and picked up a foul. Basically, that was his thing. So, you know, we can shit on Birch all we want, and deservedly so. But you know, it's not like in that -13 he was the only problem. Maybe he was a problem, which, yeah, I think that's all I want to say about Birch. I think I don't want to crap on the guy too much.
Yeah, like the last thing about Birch, I don't know if you guys mentioned this, but did you mention Thad Young? Because he was a player who's definitely missed tonight. Like he's been hitting those threes recently, which you can't really expect from him, but he's good for like 1 a game, and that would have been pretty nice today. And just like he's that option, and that's what I talked about at the deadline is when Birch doesn't have it going and when Boucher doesn't have it going, Nurse is often caught in these who do I play situations. He kind of just stuck with Boucher in this one, or assistant coach did. But I thought like if Thad was here, maybe that would have been a completely different look, that 5-man closing lineup, just like it was 2 nights ago against Brooklyn. He played great.
We talked about the 5-man closing lineup while you were at the whatever the hell you were doing there. But that 5-man closing lineup wasn't too bad. Achua, Boucher, Barnes, Siakam, Trent Jr. +6. I can see why Nick Nurse stuck with that one.
No, me too. I just mean in general, like Boucher, didn't have a great game, even though he was pretty good on the boards. And I think Thad, based on the way he's played his last few games, he's kind of just been ramping up into a version of a guy who I think could close a lot of games with all these injuries. And it just sucked to not have him.
How about Nick Nurse riding Chris Boucher and Achua for 17 minutes straight? If I can show this just quickly.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
One more time. How do I do this? Yeah, there you go. Just 17 straight minutes to end the game. The two young studs. Nick Nurse did not want Kem Birch anywhere near the court. You can put it away. You can put it away.
No, for sure. And then the other thing, lastly, is in terms of the rotation decision, I'm a little confused why Yuta isn't getting any tries, because he's a guy who actually can space the floor off the bench.
No, he can't. No, he can't. That's a rumor. That's a myth. That's
Dude, he shot 40% last season.
That was last season, man. What's he shooting this year?
36, not even bad. I think 36.
Man, why do I feel like every can we verify that stat? Is he really at 36%?
37.5.
What? Every time I see him, he's like in the backboard.
Yuta Watanabe, where is this? Yeah, 37.5. He's better than the other guys. Like to me, he should play over Banton. I don't know what they're seeing in Banton recently. The defense is good, but other than that, like I've been pretty confused when I was talking about the rotation decisions. I think Banton. I think Yuta should get the chance over Banton, especially when they're so starved for 3-point shooting. I really want to see him get another like real run here, because I think his upside is pretty high when he's in rhythm. He could be like a real rotation guy.
Oh man, I am in shock of that percentage. I thought he was like near 21%, to be honest with you. Like maybe he's really high from the corners and crappy everywhere else, but I stand corrected.
Yeah. Anyways,
I fully agree on the Utah versus Banton thing. I think I'm trying to think what advantage Banton could possibly bring. And I would say the one thing Banton does better than Utah is sort of spark the fast break with the ball in his hands. Utah's still not a great, handler of the ball, especially in transition. Doesn't necessarily have the vision or the dribbling skills, even though they're improved this year. So Banton's a little bit better at that. But I agree that's not enough to push him over the top against Utah.
No, for sure. Yeah, the ball handling, I get that, especially with the guys who are out. But to me, it's more important that they get 3-point shooting out there than Banton kind of bring the ball up the floor. Other guys are capable of doing that. And especially when your transition offense is as bad as it's been, then it's like you can't really justify it because they haven't even been getting enough out of it. Just some news before we get into our tax, man. Nick
News.
Who the Raptors passed over in favor of Isaac Bonga, signs a 2-year deal with Boston Celtics. He scored 100 points in the last 2 G League games combined. So good for him, getting what looks to be a guaranteed deal, at least partly. There's probably a team option on the second year, but still, it's a fully guaranteed. It's an NBA contract, so good for him.
Yeah, it's good to see Canadians doing well. I think we're also in line to qualify for FIBA. I think you wrote about this on the site I read.
Yeah, it's they should qualify for FIBA for sure. There's the women already qualified for their FIBA World Cup. The men advanced to the second stage, which basically just means they're top 3 in their group, and they'll now play Group A and have another round robin. But for 2 of those round robin stages, they'll have the NBA players, so they fall in the summer. So it should be pretty easy to qualify for FIBA. What really matters is like placing top 7 in FIBA guarantees you a spot in the Olympics. That's the men's goal.
That's kind of where I'm going with this. Yeah, because you follow the Canadian team way more than I do, but as somebody who sort of casually follows Team Canada and where they make the Olympics, that was a bit of a shock for us. So hopefully that doesn't happen again.
For sure. Anyways, your Can-Am tax man of the night. We're going to give it to Mr. Scottie Barnes, who we didn't talk about today because that's what happens when you're consistently good. And I've been really pleased with him just from more than anything, focus standpoint. And that kind of sounds like a silly thing to say, but like Scottie has all the talent in the world. We all know this, but like I've seen way too many games this season where he's kind of floating out there. He loses his man on defense. He gets back cut. He's just kind of, he takes a few possessions on and then a few off. I thought the last few games since they got back from the break here, he's really been focused and like so like competitive where he's making all these effort plays. And that's just something we didn't see earlier in the season. And it's now that combined with the skill he already has in the post, which is just insane skill. He's really becoming something. So Scottie Barnes, tax man of the night.
He's doing what he was doing to start the season, to be honest with you. And I again, last time I was here, I made the point that
I'll say this though: at the start of the season, his defense was pretty bad for all he was doing on offense, and now I think the defense has come around on top of the offense.
yeah, and remember, this guy played 50 games in college. That's the most basketball he's played ever in his life. So now he's playing a much more physical game. All that NBA stuff, the rookie wall. Insert your whatever normal analysis at this point. I totally expected to see him take a dip during the regular season. I totally expected to see him come back after the All-Star game when he gets a break. I think he's just getting used to the physicality of this league. And we always say, like, when you go home for the summer, what's your to-do list? And for this guy is obviously to get a little bit stronger and be a little bit more durable when he faces the physical contact that he has faced this year and will continue to face for the rest of his life, especially next year. Because if you think he's seeing, he's still seeing sort of like default defensive configurations against him. Nobody's playing the Raptors thinking, how do we stop Scottie Barnes? And next year they will enter facing the Raptors with the thing on the whiteboard in the opposing team's locker room saying, this is how we play Scottie Barnes. So life's going to get a lot difficult for Scottie, and he has to step it up. And it's glad to see that he's sort of over that midseason little ebb or flow.
Yeah.
Ebb, I think ebb. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like as bad as the OG injury is, and I'm not trying to say like there's good to come out of this, but like when you try to find the silver lighting, I think all of these extra possessions Scottie is getting are good for him because he's kind of forced into a scorer, and he is at heart a facilitator. He likes to find his teammates, but when you look at the Raptors roster and kind of the not a lot of offensive talent, the sooner he takes that step in mentality to like, I'm a scorer, I'm a superstar, I can score every time down the floor. The sooner he does that, the sooner the Raptors to me can be a scary playoff team, because he in a lot of ways is their hope in terms of, okay, which guy is going to take a jump in the hierarchy of offense. He's the obvious answer. And I just think that the sooner he changes his mentality, the sooner they have their upside raises. And right now with OG out, we're kind of seeing him change the mentality a little bit.
Yeah. All right, man. I think we've beaten this horse to death. Dwayne Casey, congratulations on beating the Raptors 4 straight times, you piece of shit.
Visit canamtax.com. It's tax season, baby. You guys got to get your 21 taxes in, I think really soon. I think by like April. So canamtax.com. You could call VJ at the top of our screen, and for all your taxing needs, they'll get it done. All right.
We're taking questions. We're taking questions or what?
Sure. Let's see this one by Lion Hunter. The Lion Hunter himself asks, why is Nick Nurse using an aggressive trapping defense against the Pistons? Why give them that much respect? Open threes kill us.
I agree, especially because they have the ball handlers to beat trapping. It's not like you're playing the freaking OKC Thunder like you did the other day and you deployed an aggressive trap, which kind of worked immediately. Here you have much better ball handlers. Fine, they're not great experienced players, but they're NBA ball handlers who can break traps very easily and know how to pass and have the size on the other side of the court to catch those passes. I thought it was a tactical mistake to do that.
Yeah, but I'll also say, yeah, like Cade killed them. His ball movement was really good. But I'll say sometimes I don't think it's Nurse asking for it. Like I know one play in specifically where Precious just ran over and double teamed, and it didn't feel like scripted. I think these young guys, because look how many young guys they're closing games with. I think some of these young guys get so revved up when they're making these comebacks that they just do these. Scottie does it for sure unscripted. They just do these double teams. And yeah, Nick likes it. Like, he's not getting mad at them for it, which you can criticize him, but it's not always part of the scheme, I don't think.
No, it's just.
But yeah,
and sometimes it works, and sometimes it works wonders. Like the example that I gave with I think it was OKC when he I think OKC was forced to call like 2 straight timeouts because of it. So it definitely has its time and place. Today, I just thought it was not needed, to be honest with you.
Yeah, to your point, the Raptors forced 10 turnovers and only got 8 points off those turnovers, and the Pistons had 17 points off turnovers, so it clearly was not working for the Raptors. Another question here I like is, which player would you replace by the beginning of next season? Ooh, yeah, okay. Which player would you replace from the beginning of next season if you had to choose one?
Okay, let's just go through the list and answer this question right here. I got a list, buddy. Barnes, I'll keep. Siakam, Birch, I'm okay. Put him in the
Mark there.
Let's do what they do in the corporate world. Like the high performers stay in boat 1, the okay performers stay in boat 2.
But we're not a corporate podcast.
In boat 3.
We're not a corporate podcast.
Well, I'm just giving you an example from my life. Okay, all right.
Okay, but
okay.
The thing is, you can't cheat and pick it has to be a rotation player.
Yeah, Cam Birch, I think is in boat 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Malachi Flynn. I mean, boat 3.
Okay.
Boat 3.
Yeah.
Banton. I'll too early to put him in boat 3. I'll put him in boat 2, so he's a maybe. Svi, unfortunately, boat 3. What do you think?
But Svi doesn't count because Svi's not in the rotation. So we're not going to pick.
Who's left? Who did I skip over?
No one, but you got to pick one.
Oh, Utah, barely into boat 2. Barely.
Yeah.
Barely.
Okay. So who's your pick?
Who's my what?
You have to pick one guy out of all the guys.
Oh, one guy to just shed completely.
No, to replace. Maybe get someone in the same position. Maybe similar skill, but just that you think would be a better fit. Maybe.
Okay, man. I'm gonna go with Cam Birch.
Okay, you stole my answer, but yeah, that's my answer too. Obviously, the center position is the one you want to upgrade, and I think you can do that because I think Precious will be starting by next season, or not necessarily starting because they have that small group, but Precious will be playing starting center minutes, and then I think you gotta, or you don't have to, but there's really no risk in improving the backup center minutes from Birch. Not even improving, but say you can get something back that fits, maybe a point guy or something for Birch, and then you can sign a minimum center, maybe something like that. But quickly behind that, this might be sacrilegious right now to say this, but I think Malachi is another guy for as much good as he's been the last few days. It's just been days. He is clearly not a good fit in the system. And I kind of thought his time with the Raptors was done at the trade deadline. And I just he clearly has skills, and so there is some upside there that you risk losing, but just in terms of the way that the Raptors want to play, I don't think he's really here for the long haul.
What above average skill does Malachi Flynn bring to the team?
Theoretically, or
no, I mean, theoretically, no, practically.
Because theoretically, the 3-point shot should be good. No, practically though, I would say the speed. He has the ability to break his guy down off the dribble, touch the paint, and then make things happen out of there. That would be his one skill.
Yeah, I mean, does he do that at an above average level though?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, I agree that is his skill, but I don't think that's a skill that is above average and worth hanging on to. I have no idea how the Raptors insiders work, but I'm guessing when Masai Ujiri or Bobby Webster were getting phone calls, Malachi Flynn was the guy on the top of the list who they were trying to shop, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would imagine that too. Josh Lewenberg reported that, that the front office was willing to get off Malachi Flynn at the deadline.
Willing. I'm sure they didn't need to be convinced too hard. All right, man. Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. We did 44 minutes. Okay. Thanks to Zarar for joining me. Thanks to Chris Howson-Jan for joining the show. Chris, you did not need to stop talking when I joined. I hope you know this.
I'm just so afraid of you that
I am quite an intimidating guy. People tell me.
Imposing presence.
Yes. The Raptors.
Can we? I think two people raised this question. We got to answer it because two people raised it.
Okay.
What's the deal? What's the contract? Is it $8 million?
I'm pulling it up. I'm pulling it up right now.
I believe it's 3 years, 21 million, more or less.
So it's 6.6 per year for 2 more years after this. I don't think it's an issue, personally.
No,
I think what we're seeing right now is Kem Birch is not in his rhythm. We've seen a better version of Kem than this, right? He can absolutely play better than this. And 2 more years at $6 million, that's a very reasonable contract for a backup center.
But inflation is 5%, man. So just knock that off right away. So we're good here on this. I mean, has he panned out as we had expected? Probably not. As we said earlier in the show, we dedicated like 5 minutes to this guy. He plays better with Fred VanVleet, and I think it's kind of harsh to judge him again in a lineup where Siakam is handling the ball and forced to run pick and pops with him.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it from an asset perspective, I mean, like a $6.5 million contract, that's the exact kind of contract that you would want to throw into a trade to make a salary match, something like that. So I think it is not killing them by any stretch.
No, it's definitely very tradable. Daniel Tice just got traded to the Celtics, and he's on, I believe, like a 4-year. Let me search this up real quick. Tice is on a way worse contract than things, and they traded for him, they traded stuff for him. So he's on this contract.
That's really bad.
And I would say he's a similar level player to Kem Birch.
Good.
Anyway,
good comp, Oren.
Good comp. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Okay, thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back here on tomorrow night after the Raptors take on the Orlando Magic. In a game that if they lose, people will freak out. You better believe that. Like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube page. Thanks for tuning in, and see you.